This story is about a human crewman whose jaw scan reveals what looks like a tumor, until he groggily reveals it's just a baby tooth. Dr. Keltroon did not scream often. It was bad for morale, and even worse for the gel filters in his respiratory slits. But when the scan lit up with a dense, oblong mass nestled inside the human's lower mandible, his upper limbs flailed so wildly he almost ejected himself through the medbay's pressure seal. What in the seven rings of Cardath is that? The answer didn't come from the unconscious human lying in the diagnostic cradle. He was sedated after biting a maintenance cable and receiving a mild electrical jolt. The incident was technically his fault, but the maintenance cable had been hanging right next to the snack dispenser and no one had posted a sign. Keltron had filed a formal protest with engineering. It was denied. Now he stood alone with this puzzling organic horror glowing bright red on the scan. Mass detected. Hard tissue. Non-native growth. Potential malignancy, the medical AI chirped. Keltroon's dorsal crest twitched. He ran the scan again. Same shape, same location. He magnified the structure. The surface was smooth, like enamel. But that made no sense. He clutched his data tablet and hurried out into the corridor. Sergeant Caleb Monroe woke with a throat like sandpaper and a jaw that felt like it had been used to block an airlock door. He blinked at the ceiling, which was far too shiny for his liking. His mouth barely moved. Why is my face numb? You're awake. Oh, good. Don't move, or breathe hard, or chew. Especially, don't chew. That voice wasn't human. It was warbly and nasal, like someone trying to play a trumpet underwater. Caleb turned his head slightly and found Dr. Keltroon looming over him with an anxiety only a three-eyed, translucent-skinned alien could truly wear. Keltroon was clutching a vial of antiseptic like it might explode. You've been immobilized for medical observation. I discovered a growth in your mandibular region. It's maybe malignant, possibly life-threatening. Caleb, high as a kite from whatever sedation protocol they'd given him, snorted and then winced. You mean my baby tooth? Keltroon froze. What did you just say? Caleb slurred. It's just a baby tooth, never fell out. It's been there since I was like 6. The silence that followed was thick enough to stir with a spoon. Keltroon tapped the med scan for the 5th time, zoomed into the mass again, and realized with crushing disbelief that the tumor had roots. Not tentacular cancerous ones, but tidy little enamel roots. You shed and regrow parts of your skeleton? Caleb tried to nod, but ended up coughing. Yeah. Teeth. Twice. It's normal. Keltroon backed away, gaze locked on the scan. This species casually discards parts of its bone structure and considers it a developmental milestone. How are you even real? Caleb tried to sit up, but the med restraints hummed disapproval. It's just a tooth, Doc. You ever lose your skin when you're a kid? Keltroon blinked all 3 eyes at him. Didn't think so. News spread quickly aboard the UFS Gauntlet. By mid-cycle, half the engineering crew had asked Caleb if they could see the freak tooth. The other half were circulating betting pools on what other parts of him might fall off during adulthood. Meanwhile, Keltroon returned to his lab and sulked. He'd already written a 7,000-word emergency report, complete with speculative models, surgical prep notes, and an annotated bibliography on xenotumors. He'd even requisitioned a stasis pod. And it was a baby tooth. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling something was off. The initial scan hadn't just shown one mass. He reran the deep tissue imaging and focused on the secondary anomaly, just behind the wisdom tooth cluster. The first scan had marked it as calcified deposit, but now it pulsed. Very gently, Keltroon leaned in. The mass had a different structure entirely, no roots, irregular layering, and something else. He filtered out the surrounding tissue, enhanced the internal patterns. There were ridges, segmented ridges, and a nerve sheath. Keltroon straightened slowly, then activated the ship's biosafety lockouts. He set the diagnostic cradle to sterile containment and tagged the anomaly for in-depth genetic analysis. Whatever was in Caleb Monroe's jaw, it wasn't a tumor, and it wasn't a tooth. It wasn't human at all. 3 hours later, Caleb was finally permitted soft foods and light movement. He chewed gelatinous ration cubes with one side of his mouth while swiping through his messages. Someone had edited the crew log to list his species as dental hydra. "Ha ha, real funny," he muttered. Just then the medbay lights dimmed and the door slid open with a hiss. Keltroon entered with a sanitized containment case and a level of caution usually reserved for live explosives. "Caleb, I need you to lie back down." "Am I dying again?" "Not yet." Keltroon placed the case on the counter and pulled up the latest scan. "There's another mass in your jaw. It's not dental, not human, and it's alive." Caleb stared at the screen. "Alive like bacteria or alive like crawling?" "It is currently dormant. Based on its structure, it may be a parasitic life form, possibly a larval stage. Its surrounding matrix is composed of what appears to be hardened plaque. Your dental hygiene is, frankly, abominable, but it's preserved the organism perfectly, like amber, for years." Caleb blinked. "You're saying I have an alien parasite in my mouth?" "Yes." Caleb leaned back and put his hands over his face. "I knew I shouldn't have eaten that jerked quillfish on Talos Station. Impossible. This specimen predates your visit by at least 6 years. It's been in your jaw since Earth." The room went quiet again. Caleb pulled his hands away slowly. "Doc, are you telling me I brought it here?" Kelterun nodded. Caleb stared at the ceiling. "So now what?" Kelterun looked toward the sealed container. "Now we remove it, carefully, before it wakes up." Caleb gripped the edge of the examination bed hard enough to blanch his knuckles. Across the medbay, Dr. Keltroon was fitting long, flexible fingers into sterile gloves with slow, deliberate motions that were anything but calming. "Hold still," Keltroon said, his tone far too breezy for someone about to dig around in another creature's jaw for a potentially ancient alien parasite. Caleb didn't move, but his lips thinned. "You've done this kind of extraction before, right?" "I once removed a juvenile flame urchin from a Retvax thoracic vein, so yes." It lay beneath the sun. Keltroon activated the scan overlay. A ghostly blue image hovered above Caleb's head, tracking the deep layers of his jaw. The mass was still dormant, curled like a fossil in a cavity just below the molars. Caleb was lying at an angle, with a rebreather looped around his nose and a local anesthetic field around his lower jaw. Keltroon examined the interface and adjusted the nanoscalpel. The plaque surrounding the specimen has calcified extensively. Fortunately, human dentin is soft enough to bore through with minimal disruption. I don't like the word bore, it implies tunnels into my face. Keltroon paused. "Would you prefer delicately access via precision microdrilling?" Caleb blinked. "That actually makes it worse." The alien gave a slow blink of all 3 eyes and pressed the activation key. A soft whirring sound filled the room as the extraction tool began its gentle, steady hum. Caleb's teeth buzzed like they were auditioning for a low-budget jazz quartet. The procedure took nearly 90 minutes. Halfway through, the hardened plaque crumbled in uneven flakes that Keltroon vacuumed away with clinical precision. But once he reached the interior of the mass, the parasite became visible, a dull, translucent sac encasing something coiled and dark, almost like a segmented walnut crossed with a centipede. "Still dormant," Keltroon muttered. "Minimal bioelectric activity. Very low thermal signature." Caleb, numb and wide-eyed, gave a thumbs up. He couldn't talk, which was a blessing for both of them. With extreme care, Keltroon used a magnetic stasis field to lift the tiny mass free. It detached with a faint popping sensation Caleb could feel down to his elbow. The parasite was immediately sealed in a biocontainment pod and shuttled across the lab into an isolation chamber with quadruple sterilization fields. Keltroon exhaled sharply and shut off the scanner. "Done. You may now curse at me with full linguistic capacity." Caleb tried, but the numbness turned it into a slurred, "You son of a." "Wonderful, that means your motor control is returning." Caleb slowly sat upright. The ache in his jaw throbbed low and steady, but nothing unbearable. "Can I go now?" "You'll need to stay on light foods and pain control for a week. Avoid high temperatures and don't chew anything denser than foam rations. Also, avoid sharing saliva with other sentients until we're certain the parasite didn't leave microscopic residue." Caleb frowned. "Sharing why would I?" Keltroon tilted his head. "I'm referring to kissing, or equivalent interspecies expressions of affection." Caleb threw up his hands. "I wasn't planning to tongue-kiss anyone with an ancient jaw parasite still cooling in the tray, Doc." "Excellent caution. I've logged your compliance." That night, Caleb lay in his bunk, watching educational vids about dental hygiene, half out of paranoia and half from a deeply unsettling desire to understand what else might be hiding between his molars. On screen, a chipper instructor named Mr. Gums danced through proper flossing technique with the same enthusiasm usually reserved for fire safety drills or cult recruitment. In fact, even his book took on a dental biofilms are home to over 700 species of microorganisms, Mr. Gums chirped. Caleb grunted. "Make that 701. Down in the med lab, Keltroon stood in a sterile suit before the isolation chamber. The parasite, now fully extracted, floated within its container, suspended, motionless, until it twitched. Only once, barely perceptible. Keltroon's brow flattened. He increased the containment pressure and lowered the ambient temperature by 10 degrees. He started a full spectral analysis. The parasite had no known DNA. Its internal systems did not resemble any archived larval structure. Its outer carapace was smooth, but not organic. It wasn't just alive, it was manufactured. 2 days later, Caleb was summoned back to medbay for a follow-up. His jaw had swollen slightly from the procedure, but was healing well. He sipped warm broth while Keltroon pored over scan logs and containment notes with increasing tension. "I've never seen anything like it," Keltroon said. "I figured that out when you stopped blinking. The parasite isn't a parasite, not in the biological sense. It's synthetic, or at least partially engineered. Biomechanical structures wrapped around dormant organic tissue." Caleb lowered his cup. "Wait, are you saying it's a robot?" "Not a robot. Something worse. It was designed to survive in a high bacteria, calcium-rich environment. That's not just preservation. It was incubating. In your mouth." Caleb froze. Why would something use teeth as an incubation chamber? Because nobody checks plaque for alien invaders. Keltroon brought up a 3D reconstruction of the parasite. Based on telemetry and mitochondrial decay, this entity likely attached itself to you at least 8 Earth years ago. The only matching timestamps in your travel log are from a diplomatic survey mission on Gravis 4. You spent time in a local village, consumed native food, interacted with wildlife. Caleb rubbed his forehead. "I did let a jelly thing lick my cheek. The locals said it was a sign of trust." Keltroon turned slowly. "You allowed an unknown life form to make direct mucosal contact with your oral region. It was diplomatic. You humans are medically terrifying." Within hours, the ship's senior science officers were notified. A formal containment review was launched. Commander Velez personally visited medbay, peered at the parasite's chamber, and muttered, "Of course Monroe found an alien bug in his face. If it wasn't him, it'd be the coffee machine." For now, the specimen was stable. It was stored in sealed quarantine with redundant AI surveillance. Even unconscious, its internal mechanisms pulsed with strange rhythms, like a dormant code waiting to recompile. Caleb was cleared for duty on limited hours, but required to report for daily scans. He did not mind. Anything was better than more dental lectures. But on the 5th day, the parasite shifted again. Its limbs spindly, wire-thin tendrils unfurled inside the containment tank. Keltroon stared at the monitor. "It's waking up. The parasite moved. Its tendrils, once curled into a dormant clump, extended slowly, as if feeling the limits of its new container. Tiny suction-like nodes at their tips pulsed faintly against the interior glass. The body, a segmented spiral with an oddly symmetrical carapace, twitched with unnerving rhythm. Dr. Keltroon took a step back, recording every frame with clinical precision while mentally calculating the odds of contamination. They weren't high. The tank was state-of-the-art, sealed with tri-quantum locks and layered biosensors. But the parasite didn't seem particularly bothered by state-of-the-art. Keltroon paged the bridge. "This is Medbay. We have confirmed bioactivity. The entity is aware." Commander Vela's voice crackled through. "It can stay aware, as long as it stays contained." Keltroon cut the channel and turned to his backup assistant, a nervous junior medic named Prell. "Run the quantum spectrometry again. Focus on the node clusters. I want to know if those are sensory organs or deployment mechanisms." Prell nodded too quickly and scrambled to obey. Meanwhile, Caleb Monroe was in the ship's galley attempting to eat porridge. This proved more difficult than expected because 3 separate crewmates had wandered by to ask if he was harboring any other surprises in his body. One of them had handed him a gift-wrapped toothbrush. "Real funny, Harlan," Caleb muttered. "It's got charcoal bristles," Harlan replied. "Top of the line." Caleb grumbled something under his breath and spooned another mouthful of beige goop into his mouth. His jaw still ached if he opened too wide, but the swelling was down and the sutures had dissolved overnight. He'd been reading the latest reports Keltroon allowed him to access, mostly technical gibberish, but one phrase had stuck with him: cohesive artificial biohost. Whatever had been incubating inside him hadn't just hitched a ride, it had waited, planned, maybe even chosen him. He didn't love that idea. When Keltroon called him back to Medbay mid-cycle, he felt his stomach lurch. The containment chamber lights were dimmed when he arrived, and the atmosphere felt colder than usual. Keltroon gestured for him to stand behind the sterile viewing screen. The parasite was now upright, or at least vertically aligned. Its tendrils rested motionless against the interior panel, forming a kind of triangular shape. "What's it doing?" "We believe it's using a sensory pattern, some kind of broadcast," Keltroon said. "No audio or known wave frequencies, but we're picking up minute vibrations along the inner surface, rhythmic, structured." "Like speech?" "More like sonar or a handshake protocol." Caleb crossed his arms. "So it's saying hi or pinging for orders." Keltroon didn't add the next part aloud, but Caleb felt it hang in the air. From what? By day 7, the parasite's structure had hardened in places. New growth had formed along the base, including 2 protrusions that resembled anchoring claws. It no longer floated passively in its chamber. It clung. Keltroon's team determined that its internal systems were self-replicating at a cellular level, forming hybrid tissue-mechanical structures. In short, it was building something inside itself. Worse still, it had begun to echo, not in sound, in biopatterns. "Dr. Keltroon," Prell said, pointing at the terminal, "the readings it's mimicking the neural signals from Caleb's prior scans." Keltroon leaned over. "That's impossible." The signals weren't exact copies, but the frequencies mirrored Caleb's alpha wave rhythms, as if the organism had recorded and replayed them, as if it had learned. "Is this how it avoids immune detection?" Prell asked. Keltroon shook his head. "No, this is how it makes itself familiar. It's not just avoiding attack, it's imitating its host." Caleb stood on the other side of the glass and stared at the thing that had slept in his jaw for nearly a decade. "It's copying my brain?" "Not your brain," Keltroon said. "Your identity signature. Its current pattern is eerily similar to yours under stress. We think it's using emotional resonance to calibrate its behavior." Caleb made a face. "So it's moody now. Great, that's not horrifying." Prell quietly muttered something about requesting reassignment. On day 10, it started humming. No external sound, no vibration, just a new waveform, a low-frequency oscillation that matched harmonic intervals in Caleb's vocal patterns. Not language, but cadence, like it had been listening. When Keltrun played Caleb's old mission debrief logs into the containment room, the parasite shifted. During the audio of Caleb's 19-minute rant about ration bars being a war crime in bar form, the entity's inner sheath pulsed in sync with his phrasing. It wasn't just mimicking, it was syncing. We believe, Keltragoon explained to the Science Council, that the entity may be a form of covert biorecessance, a long-term sleeper agent, planted inside a non-hostile species, and it uses dental plaque to disguise its incubation. One of the biologists shuddered. Why teeth? Keltragoon didn't have an answer, but privately he suspected the choice had been strategic, discreet, long-term. Perhaps teeth were simply overlooked the perfect hiding spot. Caleb spent most of the next day running simulations with the crew AI, trying to reconstruct his old mission route to Gravis 4. He remembered the food, he remembered the jelly creature, but he didn't remember anything remotely parasite-shaped, until he pulled up a still image from his helmet cam, mid-recording during a cultural festival. There, in the background, was a pedestal. On it, a sculpture, smooth, spiraled, 3 tendrils raised. He squinted. That's the thing. Keltrun studied the image. Are you certain? It's identical, just gold, probably ceremonial. Keltrun's mouthplates flattened. Then it's not just a biological tool, it's cultural, possibly religious, or sacred, or a scout, Caleb added, or a beacon. The words hit harder than either of them liked. That night, Caleb dreamed of something moving behind his molars, again. He woke in a sweat and nearly punched the metal arm. But his jaw was still, his teeth were whole, and nothing was crawling. The parasite hadn't returned, but it had left a copy. Keltrun's latest scans showed something disturbing. A minor cluster of organic residue in Caleb's left upper gum line. Not alive, not threatening, but identical in protein signature to the parasite's sheath. Is it growing again? Caleb asked. Keltrun frowned. No, but it left a biological echo, a kind of anchor, like a memory stored in tissue. So I'm marked. Possibly. Caleb looked through the viewing glass. The parasite had stopped moving again. No new signals, no mimicking, just stillness. I think it's waiting. Keltrun tapped the console. For what? Caleb didn't blink. For orders. The ship entered low orbit above Gravis 4 just after second shift, hovering over a forest of white-leafed trees and layered mist that shimmered with bioluminescent spores. It was the first time the UFS Gauntlet had returned since Caleb's original mission nearly a decade ago, and this time the crew wasn't here for diplomacy. They were here for answers. Commander Velez stood beside Caleb in the observation deck, arms crossed, lips tight. We reached out to the local government. Their response was polite, vague, offered us root wine and cultural poetry, but dodged every question about biological integration or long-term implants. Sounds about right, Caleb said. He was chewing slowly, careful to use only one side of his jaw. He wasn't in pain anymore, but he still didn't trust his own molars. We need more than guesses and ceremonial photos, Velez added. We can't carry a sleeper organism around the galaxy without understanding what it is. Or how many more there might be. Keltrun stepped into the room holding a containment case the size of a helmet. The parasite floated inside, dormant again, though its tendrils had rearranged into a strange folded shape that resembled disturbingly a stylized tooth. It stopped responding to stimuli last night, Keltrun reported. No signals, no mimicking, no bioelectric patterns. You think it's dead? Velez asked. Keltrun shook his head. I think it's listening. The team touched down at the same village Caleb had visited years before. The locals, the Serifians, welcomed them with cautious warmth. Tall, pale beings with translucent skin and bioluminescent veins, they moved with ritualized grace, often speaking in couplets and letting silence linger like punctuation. The chief, a tall Seraphian named Inali, bowed low when she saw Caleb. To you who returns with echo breath, we offer songs and salt. Keltrun quietly recorded everything, even the parts that sounded like metaphors, especially those. Caleb gestured to the containment case in his hands. We found this. It was inside me. It wasn't hurting me, but it was waiting for something, maybe for you. Inali looked at the parasite and did not flinch. It is one of the Seed Watchers. That name had not appeared in any galactic archive. Seed Watchers? Keltrun prompted. Benali turned toward the gathering circle. Long ago, our ancestors were scattered by flame winds and dust quakes. They needed a way to remember, to preserve what mattered. So they built the Seed Watchers, memory vessels, guardians, listeners. They were hidden in places no enemy would think to search. Caleb's stomach dropped. You used visitors as storage lockers. Inali inclined her head. We placed Seed Watchers in those who welcomed us, those who drank from our tables, who opened their mouths to our customs. Appellation, that jelly thing licked my cheek, Caleb muttered. Keltrun remained focused. But why now? Why activate it? Inali's glow dimmed slightly. Because the Echo Gate has returned. Another metaphor? Keltrun accessed the translation interface and checked for possible idioms. None matched. Velez stepped forward. If these organisms can mimic hosts and transmit data, they're dangerous. What happens when the gate opens? Inali's voice was steady. When it opens, memory is shared. Caleb looked down at the parasite, motionless in its case. He thought about the echo it had left behind in his gums, the way it had learned his neural rhythm, how it had copied his stress responses. Shared with who? He asked. But Inali didn't answer. Back on the gauntlet, Keltrun ran a full synthesis, using the cultural data and genetic readings from the Seed Watcher. The result was disorienting. The organism didn't just store sensory input, it converted it, translated emotions, behavior patterns, thought rhythms, into a kind of neurological code. It's like it's building a personality composite, he explained to Velez and Caleb in the lab. Not just of you, but of every host it's ever been in. Velez leaned in. Then that thing might have the memory of hundreds of people. Possibly more, Keltrun said. It only mimicked you because your pattern was most recent. But the code is layered, like sediment. There are fragments in there that predate known human contact. Caleb felt cold. He sat on the edge of the diagnostic cradle and stared through the reinforced glass. I need to talk to it. Keltrun blinked. That is not medically advisable. It was inside me, for years. If it knows how to think like me, maybe it'll talk like me too. Against his better judgment, Keltrun lowered the inner volume seal of the containment chamber and placed a filtered speaker channel between Caleb and the pod. The Seed Watcher floated, tendrils gently undulating. Hey, Caleb said quietly. I don't know if you can hear me or if you're even awake, but you've seen a lot, and I need to know why me. Why now? Nothing. Then a soft tone emerged from the speaker, a simple three-note pattern, then again, then again. Keltrun checked the translation matrix. It's responding, but not in language. It's using your old stress cadence, the same rhythm as when you first woke up after the extraction. Caleb leaned in. What do you want? A fourth tone added to the sequence, then a pause, then the entire pattern played again, faster this time. Keltrun stared at the waveform. That's Morse code, or at least an analog. The system translated, ready, sync, release. What does that mean? Velez asked. Maybe it's waiting for others to respond, Caleb said. Like a signal chain. Keltrun's spine straightened. Commander, if there are more Seed Watchers out there and they're syncing, this might be the first step in a much larger network activation. Can we stop it? Velez asked. Caleb exhaled. Maybe we shouldn't. Everyone turned. Caleb looked at the case again, quieter this time. If this thing has been gathering memories for generations, maybe it's not a weapon. Maybe it's a library, a witness. All that information, it's not broadcasting control, it's sharing understanding. Keltroon considered that. A distributed archive? Caleb nodded. What if the Seed Watchers are a failsafe? In case a civilization loses its records, a way to reboot culture from the mouse of its friends? Then why hide them? Vale asked. Keltroon answered for her. Because no one values what's obvious, and because hiding them made sure they'd survive even the worst. The Seed Watcher pulsed once more. The ship's communication panel lit up. A ping, unscheduled, from the far side of the sci-fi system. Another Seed Watcher, and then another. 12 in total. Each one sent a single packet, identical tones. Then a new signal appeared. Not from space. From Caleb's jaw. Keltroon's scan lit up. The residue, the leftover biological imprint, had begun to resonate. Not grow, not mutate, just resonate, like a string caught in perfect harmony. The system decrypted the frequency. The message was simple. Life. Caleb sat back and smiled faintly. Keltroon sealed the channel. Velez exhaled slowly. So what do we do now? Caleb stood up, stretching his shoulder. Now? We brush more often, and maybe we start listening to what's been quietly sitting in the back of our mouths this whole time. The Seed Watcher remained in containment, now fully inert. The signals stopped after 24 hours. No new growth, no signs of activation. But a copy of the data decoded, translated, and carefully archived was delivered to the Galactic Anthropology Institute, where linguists, historians, and cultural scholars were already arguing over how many civilizations were encoded inside. As for Caleb Monroe, he became a reluctant expert in xenodentistry. Every medical conference wanted to hear his story. He just wished fewer of them included tooth-themed pastries. Still, every time he felt an ache behind his gums, he paused just long enough to wonder if something old was stirring again. But it never did. The baby tooth had been removed. The parasite had been evicted. And whatever it had come to share had finally been heard